Hi, this is 365801 and this is definitely a flex video. So it's not really a flex video, but I am quite proud that I managed to read as much as I have this year, especially from one particular author that I didn't know anything about until about 1/4 of the way through 2021 anyway. So it's more of a review video of the titles that I've read because I haven't been able to do wrap-ups in the same way that I started the year doing, and so I have a lot of novels that I have read and not actually reviewed, and I do want to review them because I enjoyed them a lot and I want you to know about them and see if you want to read them too. So Lynn Van Dorn is a male romance writer, of course, obviously, I'm reading her works. She's American and I think she was born in Ohio, but has definitely spent a lot of her time in Chicago because you can see the influence of that in her North Shore series. Someone who has lived there a long time and uses some of the landmarks and geography of the area in the stories. I did not know anything about Chicago and I feel like I know a little bit more after reading some of her works. She also writes under another pen name, and that is Virginia Kelly, and I will be talking a little bit about the Virginia Kelly books at the end of the video. Now, the first work I want to talk about I read way back in March or April time in 2021, and that is Royally Screwed. I have already done a review of this work, so I'll put a link in the cards and probably in the description as well, so go check it out if you want to know a little bit more about my thoughts about Royally Screwed. But overall, they were really positive. I really enjoyed Royally Screwed. I think that it's a really good introduction to Lynn Van Dorn's work as a whole. It's fun and it's very sexy, and it was quite surprising to me because I did not expect it to have a small slight element of kink. That was a little bit of a shock and something that kind of took me aback, and yet I kind of felt like it was very appropriate for the characters and it got me into the story as well. It is about two princes. It is about Angelo, who is betrothed to Euripides, Yuri, and the fact that the two of them are stuck with each other in a sort of weird, not quite family, childhood friends to lovers type story. It is an interesting one where Angelo has to come to terms with his bisexuality, or if not bisexuality, it's straight but also bi just for Yuri. And the just for Yuri thing some people dislike, but I actually find it quite nice because there are people in the world who have that orientation where you are just bisexual for one person and it kind of gets poo-pooed or swept under the carpet, like you're not fully bi, but actually having emotional and physical attraction to someone of the same gender is something that happens. So I don't see why we should be disparaging of people's sexuality. You know, everyone has, it's a spectrum, guys, come on. So I like that. Poor Euripides, poor Yuri, he has been in love with Angelo all his life, and they were brought up together to be betrothed, and they have to kind of work out how things are between them, but with the element of stress that comes with being in a position of always being in the public, and that's what he has to deal with, the stress and pressures. So it's kind of an interesting one. What I really love about it is the two main characters' dynamic and their witty banter with each other. How much they might bicker and fight, and yet how clear it is that they both care for each other a lot as well. So it was very sweet. It was also, of course, done by Michael Fariolo, who has done the audiobook for all of these works. And I have listened, I think, to most of them in audiobook as well as reading the Kindle version. So wholeheartedly recommend listening to any and all of these because Michael Fariolo's voice acting is fabulous. I will mention some particular notable instances of good work from Michael Fariolo in this video. So Royally Screwed was published in 2020. It's one of her newer works, so it's safe to say that she's got her author's voice and style, and it's quite solidified, so you can get a really good sense of the kind of writer that she is by reading Royally Screwed. And now the second work I want to talk about is one that I came across. Someone had recommended it in a recommendations video, and I was like, oh, that's the same person who did Royally Screwed. Maybe I should give this a read, especially because I was travelling around a lot, and listening to Audible books is a good way of getting my reading in while still having to travel from one side of the country to the other. And Damage Control was the second book that I read of Lynn Van Dorn's. It is the first book in the North Shore series. This was published in 2017. It's quite a long one. It's around 500 pages, I think. And I really enjoyed it. It was much more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. I will say this now, and I'll probably say it throughout the video. Whenever you are going to read a Lynn Van Dorn work, I would maybe suggest looking out for content or trigger warnings beforehand. And that is because she takes a lot of issues that would be considered content or trigger warnings, and she constructs a story that has that as one of the central issues, but she also adds in elements of kink or BDSM or some sort of emotional sexual play that also comes under something that might be considered a content or trigger warning as well. So it's a very adult book always, but in a very soft and gentle way is how Lynn Van Dorn deals with it, in a playful and witty way as well. So Damage Control is very much one that I think is worthy of checking out the content or trigger warnings beforehand. So book one of the North Shore series, Damage Control, is at its core a fake dating to real lovers trope, which is a really great trope. I love it. But it's also got so much more going on because the characters are really rich. There's a rich background story, there's rich character development, and all of the supporting cast is really interesting as well. It starts with Tyler, who is a kind of young, up-and-coming, hot new thing in Hollywood, and unfortunately something in his past kind of catches up with him and that gets thrust into the media. We don't know who's behind this, but he now needs to kind of go and hide from the media at this moment and has to kind of just chill out somewhere, nowhere in the media, so that he can kind of weather this storm. So he gets kind of carted off to this lovely, sounds brilliant, house on the shores near Chicago, and he kind of has to hide out. Now at the same time, Josh, who is Tyler's older brother's best friend / ex-boyfriend, no longer in the closet, he is also in a house by the shores of the lake and ends up bumping into Tyler. And due to the situation that they're in, it's kind of thought that it would be a really good situation if they could just pretend to be, you know, a good solid boyfriend pair, good for the media to see him in a committed loving relationship. And of course, Tyler has always had a bit of a thing for Josh. He's the older brother's boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, and Josh has always thought that Tyler was a little cutie pie but had never thought of him in that way before. So they have to spend time together and they have to pretend that they're in love. And so of course, like most fake dating to real lovers, they get to know each other and they catch feels. But there's so much more going on because Tyler has so many issues and Josh has them as well. Tyler's is the abuse and trauma from his childhood that cause him to self-harm, whereas Josh self-harms in a different way. It's still harmful in the way that he kind of retreats into himself, and he has the trauma from always being the closeted boyfriend, the fact that no one, and I would say that in inverted commas, knew about him being in a relationship with Tyler's older brother. This is a really interesting, rich story because of all of the different characters as well. The supporting characters are really fun. I love Tyler's friend, Pervy, and Brad and Rachel are pretty likable. Brad is the other brother and Rachel is his wife, and it's a really nice story, and it kind of set up all of the other characters and the different issues that they all have to deal with, and it seems like a terrible situation. Basically, a celebrity, even if he is an up-and-coming one, in a scandal, and they have to go away and hide from the media. And I think with the way that, you know, I was reading this around the time that the whole Britney Spears thing was kind of being thrust into the limelight again, and it was like, yes, a lot of these women especially, but a lot of people who are supposed to be celebrities, they do deserve a huge apology from, you know, not just the paparazzi whose job it is to hound them, but also everyone in the media and then everyone on social media. And, you know, the people are real people, they have feelings. And so it did make me think about the bigger picture, not just, oh, this is a male-male romance. There's a lot going on in this story. So yeah, I really enjoyed the first book, and the smexy scenes were smexy. Hey, you know, the love between the two of them really is a sweet, funny, growing relationship. I enjoyed it a lot. Now the next one I'm going to talk about is Be My Mistake, which is also a North Shore story, but it's kind of a prequel of sorts to the first book, but it was published around the same time, or maybe just a little bit after. And follows Tyler's friend Ethan and his love story. So Ethan has gone with Tyler, who's his ex-boyfriend, to a Valentine's Day party in this little novella, to a sort of movie mogul's house in the Beverly Hills mansion area, like fancy, ridiculous, over the top. Anyway, he runs into this very hot stranger who's quite a bit older than him, who is very much a daddy. So this has, of course, a big healthy dose of kink and daddy play going on, which I'm also a bit like, oh, I'm not really sure how I feel about this. And then after reading this, I'm like, yep, totally fine. Yep, bring on some more. I'm okay with it. So it is also, once again, a sort of kink BDSM type story, but it's very fluffy and very sweet. It is a May to December story, so it has that younger man and older man and the daddy play going on. Charlie is the man whose massive big mansion they're having the party in, that Ethan just kind of stumbles upon him, and the two of them actually get on incredibly well, and Charlie just kind of decides that he is now Ethan's daddy, and Ethan is very happy to have a daddy. He's on the lookout for one. Seems like they're just pretty perfect for each other. They just straight away have like almost instant attraction, and it is very much happily ever after in this very short, it's only 100 pages, little Valentine's Day novella. Be My Mistake is a really sweet little amuse-bouche for you to kind of take on after you've read Damage Control and before you get into book 2, technically, of the North Shore series. Now, along with Be My Mistake is an even shorter little extra story. It's like a single chapter day in the life of Ethan and Charlie, and that is Forgive My Mistake. And you get even more of Ethan's pillow princess character, his snarkiness, his wit, his comedy, and also how much Charlie just adores him and is his daddy. And it's just a fun one. It really does push the twink pit element of the story, which if you've read it, you will now know what that is. It's really funny, and that it does give rise to the whole twink pit name for Lynn Van Dorn's group on Facebook. So if you do join her kind of group on Facebook, it's called the Twink Pit, and if you read Forgive My Mistake, you will know why. It's basically just a fun little room. It's kind of like what I imagine 50 Shades of Grey could have been. I've never read 50 Shades of Grey though, so I can't say if it's like that or not. But I did enjoy it. It was a fun little extra chapter of Ethan and Charlie, and they are so fun, and Be My Mistake is just a little quick story, so it was nice to get a little extra. It is technically Be My Mistake and Forgive My Mistake. They're both technically extras that come before Damage Control as prequels, but I think were published a little bit after, maybe. So Damage Control I think came first, and yet these are things that happened beforehand. So you can read them in any order, but it is quite good to have read Be My Mistake before you read Forgive My Mistake. Second book in the North Shore series, Daddy Issues, I think I found even more emotional than the first one, Damage Control, just because it was so sad for a lot of it. It follows Ryan, who is Tyler's brother, the one that Josh, his now partner, used to secretly date. And the reason that they secretly dated for all that time was because Ryan did not want to come out of the closet. He was pretending that he was bisexual, or maybe he is bisexual, but he very much has wants and needs that even being in a relationship with a man wasn't enough for him, but he's kind of unaware of that. Once again, there is a lot of BDSM and kink in this. There is very much in the dom sub kind of area, so I do think if that's something you're interested in or you enjoy that, you might enjoy this one as well. So Ryan, unfortunately, he's stuck having to look after his father, who is a very difficult, and I don't know how to say more than him being incredibly, I guess he's the kind of reason for all of the troubles, hence the reason why this is called Daddy Issues. He is kind of the one that has caused so much of the trauma in the family, trauma for the sons, due to the fact that he is very much against any kind of gay LGBT presence in his life. He's also very much a controlling person, so if you do not live up to his standards, then you are not worthy of him. And Ryan has always tried his best to be what his father wanted of him, which certainly was not someone who would be in a relationship with another man. And so Josh suffered terrible trauma from having to keep himself and his relevance in Ryan's life a secret, and Ryan has suffered too. But at the end of the book, the first one in the series, you still do not like Ryan. You know that his reasons for it, but you can't really forgive him. And so this is kind of his redemption arc, that you get to know who he is as a person. And I do think this is something that Lynn Van Dorn does in her other series as well. You get a character who is portrayed in a particular way in one book, and then you kind of get to know them more in another book, and you realise what kind of person they actually are. So this is something I really like. Usually I don't like redemption arcs for people who are just mean and awful characters in books, and you think, no, I don't want to feel sympathy for you. And then you read the book and you're like, damn it, I feel really sympathetic for you. And I ended up loving Ryan as a character. He really grew. There was a lot of character growth in this story. So anyway, Ryan trying his best, having to look after his old man who's getting increasingly sick, having to run the business, having to do everything, having to sort out Tyler's work as well. He's like a successful lawyer, but he's so sad and so lonely and messing up his life in various ways. And he ends up meeting Marek, who is a Polish-American who live-in nurse, who comes to look after the father, who is an awful man, who's just a terrible man. But Marek is a very large man, and he knows how to deal with a lot of difficult clients or patients. And he becomes live-in this big estate, and Ryan wants him gone because they kind of know each other for some reason, and they've run into each other before, and they don't really have the best opinion of each other. But they end up having to be, once again, forced together, so it's close proximity kind of trope, where two people have to, in a way, live together and deal with each other. But Marek is very much a dom, and he sees something in Ryan that he wants, and he wants for, I wouldn't have said the nicest reasons at first, but there's definitely something that comes from it. I think their feelings definitely develop over time, but their relationship is kind of fraught, because there's a lot of aspects there with a dom-sub relationship, but also a employer-employee relationship, and obviously Ryan, who is trying desperately to maintain the facade that he is, you know, a daddy's perfect child, when he feels like he definitely is not on the inside. It's a difficult one to read, and yet it's very smexy, it's very fun, but it's a very emotional one, and I felt like by the end of it, it's incredibly uplifting and sweet. So I really liked the ending of, it was a slog to get through, I was sad in a lot of moments, but it was a really nice read. Now on to another title that is a standalone one-shot, not part of a series. After reading the North Shore series, I knew that I enjoyed Lynn Van Dorn's work a lot, so I wanted to read more of it, and I thought Now You See Me looked like a good one. It also has a lot of similarities to a couple of other works I was reading at the exact same time, so around June, July, I was reading quite a few books that had professor-student relationships with a little hint of BDSM. So I did read another one by another author called Jaywalking, which I could talk about in another video. I enjoyed it, but I enjoyed this more, so I'd rather talk about this one. This is about Miguel. Miguel is someone who considers himself straight, but was in the military. Specifically, I think he was in the sailors division, and we all know what the Navy is like. I think there's just this general understanding that the Navy is a gay place to be, and Miguel does not in any way kind of refute, is that the word? He kind of was just like, yeah, maybe maybe I'm a little bit not quite as straight as I think I am. He is also someone who enjoys kind of telling people what to do, so he's got that sort of dom side to him as well. So Miguel, after being in the Navy, he kind of comes out to what he wants to do in life. He's got a little bit of money, he's got some dreams, and so he goes to university to study. It just so happens that his anatomy professor, Dr. Cummings, yes, she chose Cummings, is a pretty sexy guy, and he's like, I'm not as straight as I think I am. His professor lives across the street in his own building, and is kind of known as being a bird watcher, but is actually, everyone thinks he's a peeping Tom, because specifically that he has peeped on the student who was in Miguel's room previously. So he is aware that this Dr. Cummings might be able to perv on him in his room, especially if he leaves the windows and the curtains open. Anyway, Dr. Cummings is also known as Aldrich, that's his name. He lives across the street, and yes, he does have a thing for watching people. He is a voyeur, and so once again, this is another kind of kink that has been introduced to me. I didn't really think about reading stories with voyeurism, and I enjoyed this immensely. Miguel and his culture and his family are really fun, and I love listening. Once again, Michael Furiolo got to do some accents, and I love his accents. I love it when he does accents. So he has some, I think, where did they go? Are they from Puerto Rico? I think they might be from Puerto Rico. So he gets to do some accents. In the previous one, North Shore Stories, he got to have like American Polish, so he had his Polish accent. Oh, so good. So yeah, Miguel is a really fun, nice, interesting, slightly mature student. and Aldrich is a quite young professor, and they engage in a bit of voyeurism, one being on show and the other watching, and how they kind of navigate that when it comes to, you know, their neighbours and their relatives and colleagues, and a bit of bondage, and yeah, there's a lot going on in this one, and it was just really fun, and it was very steamy, and it was an interesting story compared to the other stories I was reading at the time, because there were so many things that were similar about the different teacher-student stories that I was reading. But this one kind of came out just probably because, like, better than the others, just because of the writing, the elements of different cultures, and the wit and warmth of the relationship between the two. It's very much like, oh no, we shouldn't, we can't because of this, and oh, you're my student, and all that kind of stuff. There is definitely that. There are stakes. There is naturally a stake when it comes to a teacher involving themselves with a student, and that's not something that is always dealt with, and I think it was dealt with in every story that I was reading, so it was a lot more real. There was reasons for not getting into the relationship, not just for the emotional side, but also professionally. But I really enjoyed Now You See Me, and they did, and it was great. It's a great title. It does exactly what it says on the tin. That's it. It is what it is. But I really enjoyed Miguel as a character. Now, the next one that I read was Wild by Nature. This is a short little story, 137 pages, I think, which I'm not entirely sure if it was published at the end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020, so a fairly new one. It's just a really short little romance novella, including sort of like what you, like, honestly, Lynn Van Dorn obviously had this. Just like, these are the two things I'm going to do, and we're going to write this little story, and it's going to be funny. So there's a twink, her words, not mine, that finds himself lost in the woods, and there's like a big bear man who lives in the woods. He finds him and takes him home, and that's kind of it. There's not much else that happens. A man who he kind of lives on his own, Kurt Jorgensen. He's got a very sort of Scandinavian name. He's big, he hunts, he does little odd jobs here and there, and he lives in this old house I think his grandmother used to own or something. So he just kind of like hangs out and does his own thing, looks after his animals. You know, he's got like a homestead or a farmstead, something like that, and he just lives out in the woods in the forest, and he goes hunting out there, and he finds this boy, this beautiful boy, and of course he's like, oh no, dead person. Stupid, you know, townies coming out here thinking they can just, you know, go walking in the woods, and they get themselves hurt and then die from exposure, and oh no. But actually it turns out this beautiful boy that kind of stirs something in him is still alive, and so he saves him and takes him back to his house. So the boy that he saves is Hayden, who got into a bit of a fight with his ex-boyfriend, and his ex-boyfriend just dumped him out on the roadside, and he thinks, well, I'll just storm off into the woods, and he never comes back to find him, and then just leaves. So he just left him out there, just expecting Hayden to be fine, but Hayden's not, because he fell down and he hurt himself and he couldn't move, and so he can't walk and almost dies, which is terrible. But then he gets rescued by this big Norse god of a man, so... And of course he can't do anything because he's stuck in this man's house, which is kind of like there's a river that you need to cross to get to the house, and only, you know, at certain times or with certain vehicles can you get across, and he's got a broken leg or something like that. So yeah, he is stuck out there with this big beefy man, and they are quite happy to be stuck together. And that's kind kind of it. There's not very much. It's a very short little novella, but it's really sweet and cute, and it's nice to see their relationship develop. But it's a really fast little read, so it's a nice one you could probably do in an hour or so. So if you're looking for this little romance novella, it's a good one to start with as well. Okay, so the next one I read is maybe one of my favourites of all of Lynn Van Dorn's stories. This is a really, really short one. It's only 58 pages, I think. I think it's around 14,000 words. So this is a really, really short little... it's not even properly a novella, I don't think. It's like just a one-shot story, and I love it. It's just so stupid and sweet and fluffy, very smexy, but seriously stupid, and I think that's why I love it so much. It's just exactly what I kind of wanted or needed the day that I read it. It was like, mwah, chef's kiss. So it's called Meet Me at Midnight, and it follows Beck and Adrian, and it's in a fraternity. Now, I hate frat stories and college stories with frats and things like that because they're stupid, and I disagree wholeheartedly with the idea of them. And because I'm not American, they seem so alien and ridiculous. So, anyway, I love this one. So, anyway, this is a New Year story, so very much about the midnight element. And it's called the New Year Games that this particular fraternity puts on. And it's for the benefit of the new fraternity, I don't know, members? Is that what you'd call them? So the first year boys who want to be part of this frat, they have to undergo all of these special games and things that they're playing over the New Year evening. And Beck is kind of in charge of running the show as well as the other people, and one of them decides to implement a game that is so stupid. I loved it, but it involves the boys, the first year boys, doing things to the older members and hopefully achieving their goal before the stroke of midnight. And one of the newbies is a guy called Adrian, who hates frats and doesn't want to be in a fraternity, but to be able to get his college tuition paid, his father says he has to be part of this fraternity. So he can't not get into the fraternity. He needs to do well in all of these games. Anyway, this final game that's proposed is like perfect for him, because he's a little gay boy who's quite happy to do what it is that they're asking the boys to do. Because they're saying, oh, this is such a gay, in inverted commas, thing. It's going to be awful for them, and it's going to be, you know, awful but also funny for us. And Adrian is totally fine with that, because the person that he's having to be paired with is the person he's had a crush on for a long time, which is Beck, who is the first boy that we were talking about. And so the two of them end up just having to do something together with each other that they weren't expecting to do, and enjoying it and liking it a lot. And then from there they have a lovely sweet romance, and they you know, and forever and ever and always they are a lovely couple. It's just a sweet little story, and it's very short. It's very short, and it was just funny, happily ever after nonsense from college boys, and I didn't expect to enjoy this, but I really, really did. It was hilarious and very, very sweet. So this next one is probably the one that I least like, and it's called Rule 47. It's also incredibly short. It's only 49 pages, so it's a really, really short one, which is probably just as well because I was like, not really sure about this. Anyway, it's once again another May to December romance, so a younger man, older man, and once again it has a daddy kink in it. So yeah, it was kind of interesting, because the daddy in question was actually a daddy. It's not incestuous in that way, but it is kind of a little bit... Anyway, Logan, unfortunately, I think he's finished college at this stage, so it's fine. No child issues there, so I think he is an adult at this point, but he does not like his mother's new husband, so he can't stay with her. He can't find a job. He can't find somewhere to stay. And he literally has all of his belongings in a cardboard box, and he's standing outside on the porch, outside the front door of this guy called Craig, who used to be married to his mother and was his stepfather at one point in time. But he's kind of the reason they broke up, or at least kind of the reason. So Craig is not exactly very happy to see Logan. One, he's all grown up, but he's also, you know, he wasn't exactly the best kid to be around. So he is also someone who has the Dom gene in him. He wants control, he wants order, and he wants submission. And Logan is not necessarily into the submission thing until he's into the submission thing, and then you're like, oh, okay then. So, yeah, Craig and Logan, it's a very short little story. Like I said, it's only like 11,000 words. And I was like, not too sure about this, but also I enjoyed it in some respects. So this is, out of all of Lynn Van Dorn's works, probably the one that I didn't take to as quickly as the others. But that's not to say that I didn't still read it and enjoy it. So yeah, take this one with a pinch of salt. So the last two books that I'd like to talk about in terms of the Lynn Van Dorn novels is part of the Oleander Chronicles. I think there is supposed to be a third one planned as well, but I did read the first two. So this first one is called Reunion, and it involves Brett, who has been childhood sweethearts with Tony, and the two of them were just best pals. They spent all their time together, but circumstances kind of forced them apart, and they were kind of disillusioned. They kind of felt like they were betrayed in some way. So Brett has not gone back home to Oleander for a long time. He is a doctor. He breaks up with his boyfriend in the first like couple of chapters, and has to go to Oleander to look after his mum's house and his mum, who is unfortunately ill and having some sort of hip operation. I think she breaks her hip. His sister is pregnant, and so she can't do it, so it's forced onto Brett, and Brett kind of begrudgingly goes back to Oleander even though he hasn't been there in a long time. He then discovers that his mother has not really been looking after herself or her house very much, and so he needs a lot of work done to it. And so he asks the neighbour, the busybody next door, who is lovely, who he should get. And so she says, don't worry, I'll get someone for you. And she does. And Tony, his childhood sweetheart, who betrayed him as a young teenager, turns up to do the work on his home. But it turns out that what happened in the past when they were like 18, 19 years old, neither of them really fully understood, and neither of them fully understands what the other went through on the same night. And it's like two traumatic things have happened, one to either of them, and because of that, neither of them have spoke, and neither of them have actually dealt with what happened. They've just felt betrayed. And so they end up having to meet each other again now in the future, and kind of work out the lingering emotions and attraction that they have for each other. But at the same time, they then have to deal with the fact that they haven't spoken about what happened that night all those years ago, and what has happened in their lives since. So they've got a lot of catching up to do, and it's a second chance at love. So it is quite steamy. It's interesting. There's a bit of hate sex going on there, which I was like, oh, okay, but also very hot. It does involve a few things that I really, really enjoyed. Some of the things, like the chapter titles, was really smart and funny. I really enjoyed the witty banter and text messages, phone conversations between Brett and his sister Miranda. They were really funny, and they were nice ways to break up the story and also kind of keep you abreast of what was going on. And also there was like pink flamingos in this little town. And the pink flamingos and what happened to them was really funny, but also a bit sad. But more of that in the next book. So yeah, these two did have a very... it was an interesting book. It wasn't my favourite, but I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed a lot of aspects. But it really felt like they could have just sorted out a lot of stuff with a bit of communication. And that's one of the things that I dislike, is when there is miscommunication or a lack of communication, and that's the reason why their love doesn't, you know, the reason for the conflict is just a lack of communication. And so for me, that's always like, ugh. You know, if someone just spoke up and said something, none of this would have happened, or it could have been very different. That's not to say it would have worked out, but I still think that as a plot point is not my favourite. So I was like, not too sure about this, and then it made me not too sure about reading the next one as well, but I still enjoyed it. Now, the second book in the Oleander Chronicles series is Rebound, and this follows Jacob Goldman, who was Brett's ex-boyfriend, so the one that he broke up with just before he went back to Oleander. This is a new book. It only came out on the 21st of May this year. So there is no Audible book for it yet. You can only read the Kindle version. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, all of these books are on Kindle Unlimited and they don't cost you anything to read, so check them all out. But it did mean I didn't get the benefit of Michael Furiello's beautiful voice. And I did have to actually just read the whole story instead of using the Kindle Whisper Sync or Audible app. But I could still hear him in my head because I listened to all of these stories of Michael Furiello's voice in all of the stories. So I could still hear his voice for the characters. I'm interested to find out what he will do with these characters and what kind of voice he will do for them. But Jacob is not, once again, painted in the best light in Reunion. And so you kind of are like, oh no, it's going to be a book with his redemption arc. Ugh. And I have to say, I really love this. I love this so much. And Jacob, I love Jacob. What happened? Because he's painted as such a whiny, kind of, he's kind of like a whiny, twinky, fashion obsessed, you know, image obsessed cutie pie, but like vapid, and he's not really painted in a brilliant light, and he kind of does have that as one aspect of his existence, but it's not who he is, and that's what I really loved. This one took, you know, like an image you have built up or that's been presented to you as a reader, and strip it away to the thing that's left, the actual character, is nothing like the person that was presented to you in that first book. He is nothing like who we were led to believe. Damn you, Lynn Van Dorn, you liar. She lied, because Jacob is so sweet. He just didn't want Brett, his boyfriend, to take him for granted. And so he just thought it would be really like, fine, we'll just break up. But he didn't realise that Brett was just like, oh, okay then. So, you know, Brett obviously did not care for him in the same way that Jacob cared for Brett. And that's kind of like a real slap in the face, because one, he thought he was being taken for granted. And then two, he realises he was never loved. Not in the way that he thought he was, which is like heartbreaking. Poor boy. Anyway, he ends up doing some damage to one of the flamingos from the town when he comes in, and ends up damaging the car, which wasn't actually his, but instead it's his father's. It's a classic car that needs to be repaired, and so he needs a mechanic, a good old local mechanic, to repair it for him. When I first read the synopsis, I was like, oh god, this sounds terrible, I don't want to read this. And I'm so glad that I did. Levi is a sweetie pie as well, and As soon as he sees Jacob, who looks like, what do they call him? An Uber twink from South Florida. He's like not interested whatsoever. But Jacob and Levi kind of end up getting, once again, forced together in this situation where they're in this small town. And it's kind of like, if I want to say anything, I want to say that this is like a Hallmark movie. I could see this being a Christmas movie. It's exactly a Christmas movie, except for, you know, the hash, the marijuana, the special baked goods, the bird funeral, hate sex. That was funny as well, and also there's a really desperately sad story behind Jacob's life. He seems like, on the surface, like I said, on the surface you see all of these things about him, and underneath it's trauma in the worst way. And it kind of came on me like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And then when it did, you were kind of prepared. Lynn Van Dorn kind of prepared you for what was going to happen. And then when it finally did, I was in floods of tears for Jacob. Bless him. I was so sad for him. And Levi seems to be the person who can help heal him. And he needs healed. And it was so desperately sad and so desperately lovely at the same time. I've got to say, shout out to Maxie, who is Jacob's friend, who is hilarious. And I'm sure that he will be one of the main characters in a future book. He has to be. He deserves his own future book. He is fantastic. And I really did enjoy the nonsense that Jacob seemed like he's in that kind of character, and yet by the end of it you know that he's a completely different person. I know that there is going to be a third book in the series, but I hope Maxie gets his own book in the series as well. I know that the book that's being written just now does not involve Maxie, but I do hope that at least there's a little extra or some sort of side story that we get in Maxie, because Maxie's a really good friend and a really fun character, so it would be good in the future. And I would like to be able to listen to this as well with Michael Furiolo, so there will be a reread in the future when it is available to listen to. Now, as I mentioned, Lynn Van Dorn does write under another name, and that name is Virginia Kelly, and that is specifically for a particular series, and that's the Forbidden Desire series that she writes with Piper Scott. Now, Piper Scott is the pen name of what was 3 authors, but might actually be just 1 author now. So I don't know who the 3 authors were. I haven't found any information about who Piper Scott is. But together, Virginia Kelly and Piper Scott, they have written the series, the Forbidden Desire series, which is Mpreg, Alphas, Omegas, and Betas. It is magic and fantasy, but in a real world-ish setting, which I love. One of my favourite things is when the world appears to be the exact same as it is now, except there's one aspect or element that's been added that makes it fantasy, that makes it modern, that makes it fantastical in some way. And that's dragons. There's dragons. Dragon, Mpreg, Alpha, Omega, Beta. It's all in this series, and I love it. I love it. But for the longest time, I did not want to read these. I saw on her website that she had this series written under another pen name, and I looked at the artwork for the front covers, and I kind of saw a general synopsis, and I thought, oh, fantasy stories? No, I've had enough of them, because I have read a lot of shifter romance this year, and I've even read a couple of dragon, magician, werewolf shifter. I don't know what was going on in all of that. but they were quite entertaining as well. But I'd read so much of it that I was like, no, I don't want to. But because by this point I'd read almost everything that I could get my hands on, and I still had a lot of travelling and a lot of my time to spend doing things, I was like, oh god, do I want to? And I just was like, fine, give it a go. It's on Kindle Unlimited. You can just have a wee listen, or you can just read it. Give it a go, see what you think. Especially if you get it, and this is the main reason why I read the series. If you have Kindle Unlimited and you borrow the book, then you go to Audible, you can get it whisper synced. So you don't need to use a full credit, and you don't need to pay the full price of the Audible. You only pay half price or something like that, and it's like £3.25 or 29, something like that. So it's like £3 something for the Audible version of the book, rather than paying the full price, which is why I did. I thought, give it a go. It's Michael Furiolo. You know you're gonna love it. So Michael Furiolo has done, as I said, the Audible versions of all of these books. So if you like his voice, which you do, let's just be honest, you will enjoy listening to this. So I was like, just do it. It's £3. You've got like a 2 or 3 hour journey ahead of you. You've got some things to, you know, do while you're on the bus or the train or the plane. Just have a wee listen. And so I did. And unfortunately, it was fabulous. So the Forbidden Desire series is actually a full 3-volume series plus the spin-off series. So there's the Forbidden Desire series that has 3 books, and then you've got 5 books after that that's part of the spin-off series. Now the reason there are 8 books is because the story follows the Drake family, which includes Grimble Drake, who is the father figure, and the 7 children that he has. And every book follows each one of them on their romantic relationship. And so it's quite a neat way of having a series and having limits to the series. And it also means that if you are introduced to some of the characters in one book and you fall in love with those characters, you're going to want to read the rest of the series, because those characters are bound to pop up because they're family. They're gonna be there. So it does mean that if you like one of the characters in the first or second books, you're gonna want to keep on reading because that character will pop up and you'll get to see them again. And it's annoying because it does make you want to read the rest of the series. Now the first book in the Forbidden Desire series is called Clutch, and it follows Alistair Drake, who is the baby of the family, as it were, and the one that everyone worries about, and is kind of a bit of a screw up and kind of seen as a not particularly successful dragon. And his interactions with an Amiga called Nate, or Ignatius is his actual name, or Iggy as his friend calls him. And they meet when Nate decides that he's gonna go on Grindr and find an alpha to help him get through his Omega heat. And Alistair decides to jump on the chance. So yeah, the idea of a dragon, you know, almost 1,000-year-old creature, hooking up with people on Grindr is the kind of thing I am here for. This is the reason why. The idea of the normal world, but just with a touch of magic. So the person who's your hookup just happens to be a magical creature. So that's the kind of fantasy that I really, really love. And it gives an element of comedy as well, the fact that they're using Grindr. It's ridiculous. So yeah, anyway, Alistair hooks up with Nate, and then 3 months later, Nate ends up laying some eggs. And it's like, what the hell just happened? And Alistair turns up and is like, hey, give me the eggs. And Nate is all like, no, they're my eggs. His flatmate, Harry, who happens to be like a genius herpetologist. He's got PhD and everything. He's a sweetie pie. He's kind of annoying in this first book, but he is a sweetie pie. And he's like, yeah, you just laid some eggs. They do look sort of reptilian. I would know. I'm, you know, a genius herpetologist. And did I know that herpetology was a study of like reptiles before? No, I've never come across herpetologists before. So there you go. Yeah, it's kind of an odd one. And this is all just like in the first couple of chapters. Literally, this is how it starts. It's insane. So yeah, Nate's like, no, these are my eggs. And Alistair's like, no, they're my eggs. And Nate's like, they came out of my ass. Just so the comedy level is peak. I love it. Anyway, because Nate is a non-pedigree Omega, and Alistair has not been sanctioned by the Dragon Council to be allowed to have children of any kind, they have to kind of keep these eggs a secret until they get like clearance, and until they're allowed to exist. This is a really great way to introduce a series when you've got someone who has not been inducted into this magical world coming into contact with someone who is part of this magical world, and then the kind of juxtaposition between like someone's expectations and their new reality, or you know, the kind of like, well, this is just the way it is, and someone questioning why. So it does make it easier for the reader to kind of get a sense of what the world, this world building that's taking place, what it is, and what their laws or rules or standards are, and what is normal in this fantasy existence. And so it's a really clever way of doing this first book. Alistair is a kind of a funny one. He's kind of like a wet... He's kind of a wet kind of dragon. He's not a very impressive dragon, I have to say. I mean, he's the first and only dragon you meet, so he's kind of impressive in the first book. And then you read the rest of the books and you're like, he's not that impressive. Especially when his siblings get introduced, and then you realise, yeah, Alistair is not a brilliant catch. You know, he's still probably got like $1 billion, but he doesn't have billions and billions of dollars, and therefore he's thought of as poor in this fantasy world. So that's another thing about some Lynn Van Dorn books. Sometimes there are people who have a lot of money, and then there are people who do not have a lot of money. And that juxtaposition between wealth and power and privilege is also something that she kind of deals with in some of her works, and I like that. I also like the fantasy of someone being very rich, because, you know, the fantasy of richness is a fantasy I think we can all get behind. It's not something I think should exist in real life, but as a fantasy, I'm okay with it. Nate is such a great character. I think he's brilliant. He's so deadpan, and he just wants to keep studying. He's very much a bookworm. He's trying to get his PhD, and I totally get that whole academic thing. You know, he's a medieval scholar. I'm like, high five, yes, yes, we've both been there, like, the smell of old books, quiet library. I just love it. And Nate is sort of, he tells it like it is. He's like very witty and funny and caustic at times, and I really enjoy him as a character. It's an interesting and fun way to introduce this whole series. In the series, you get introduced to Harry, who is Nate's kind of flatmate. And in this first volume, I didn't really enjoy Harry. I found him to be annoying, and I kind of think, once again, this was how he was intended to be read. Like Lynn Van Dorn's doing her bait and switch again. She's saying, hey, this person is really annoying, and they're not always doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing. And then you read their story and you're like, damn it, I love them. So I definitely found that was the case again. I didn't particularly enjoy Harry in Clutch. But who I did enjoy in Clutch was Alistair's older brothers. Two of them were introduced. One is Sebastian, and his mate, who is an Omega. And they've been together for a long time, and they've had their own clutch, and their clutch is about to hatch. So you meet Sebastian, who's a very big dragon, and Peregrine, his mate, who is a very small and quite intelligent, shrewd, but sweet Omega. And they're just lovely. I love them. But you also get introduced to Everard, who is the doctor dragon of the family. And I love Everard. Everard is also annoying, but in the best way. I absolutely fell in love with Everard in this first book. And I liked Alistair and I liked Nate, but I loved Everard. He is just the most annoying character, but in the best possible way. He was hilarious. I don't think it would have been the same story if it hadn't had Everard in it. So yeah, I loved Clutch. There was definitely some heightened tension. There was some action. There was a moment when I was like, oh my god, I didn't see that coming, and then I felt very worried. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I want you to read it and then be like, whoa, yes. So there was some high stakes there. I loved it. I just loved it. And it was so good. I had to go on and read the next volume. Now, the second volume in the Forbidden Desire series is called Bond. And if you hadn't already guessed, this is Everard and Harry's story. So, of course, you're getting introduced again to Harry and again to Everard. And it's the same story that you've just read. And in the same sort of timeline, but you're getting it from the different characters' perspectives, which I also loved. I loved the fact that there was elements about it that I had already known, and so there was conversations that had taken place, and you were seeing it from either Nate or Alistair's perspective, but then the same conversation was had, and then you were seeing it from either Harry or Everard's perspective, and so it brought a different dimension to the whole scene, and it took on a whole different meaning. And I really enjoyed that aspect, that this world and this conversation and things that have happened had been planned out really well. So they've done a really great job of really planning what was happening. Also, Everard and Harry, I didn't see the two of them having any kind of chemistry, and then I was like, there's definitely something going on in the first book, but not to the extreme that happened in Bond. And I was like, yes, I love it. I'm here for it. Harry definitely takes on a completely different dimension in this second book, because you do get to understand what his motivations are, what his thoughts and feelings are, and what kind of person he is. And by the end of it, you are just like, wow, what a wee cinnamon roll. He is wonderful. He needs to be protected. And Everard is hilarious because in a way he is oblivious to his own feelings and his own desires, except in a very base level, and he doesn't really fully understand himself. And I think the kind of relationship that he has with Harry brings out the best in him, and him being with Harry brings out some other aspect in Harry. And I like the fact that he seemed to be, everyone kind of just considered Harry to be a sort of asexual being, but then him being around Everard completely changed everything, and I like that aspect. I like that whole, it made Harry have a different dimension to his character. It's just a really great, so it's the same kind of action, the same kind of, feeling of, oh no, something's happened, and you know that it's coming in this one because you've already read it, but you're seeing it from a different perspective, and you're like, this is really harrowing, this is really, really scary, what's going to happen? And then, of course, you kind of know, but you kind of don't, because parts of that story you didn't get to see. So I really loved Bond. It's probably my favourite, just because I love Everard so much. One of the things I do have to say about Everard is he gives everyone pet names, and he gives Harry pet names to do with food. So any kind of delicious morsel, he calls him by that delicious morsel. So, like chickpea or lamb chop. Anything that's a food, that's a delicious food. And he gives every Omega that he meets some sort of pet name And he changes the pet name every time, but they're always thematic. And I appreciate that. I love thematic things. So when he's talking to Nate or about Nate, he has a different theme. When he's talking about Harry, it's a food theme. So I won't tell you all the different themes for the different people, because that's something you should discover for yourself. Except for Peregrine, he doesn't have for Peregrine. And I didn't pick up on that. So that's a little something that you should know. Everard, though, is a doctor. He's very medically minded. And I love him. He's brilliant. You should read this series, this whole series, just for Everard and Harry. 100% recommend. Bond is probably my favourite book out of the series. Now, the third book in the series is called Mate, and it really does expand on some of the topics and themes that were developed in the first two books, specifically to do with mate bonds between people, so specifically the alpha dragons and the omega dragonettes. By this stage, they're just called dragonettes, although they are still called disgraces as well. And that is due to the fact that when an omega has a clutch, it's seen as something to celebrate, but when they give birth to a human, it is seen as a disgrace. And so that human and the omega that gave birth to the human is seen as a disgrace and shunned by the rest of the dragon society. Yet they are still put into these sort of cloisters, these pedigree cloisters as they're called, where they are kind of taken away and groomed for breeding. It's all very archaic. It's not very nice. But the times they are a-changing. And Mate deals with the third Drake sibling. This is Joffrey Drake. I like that he was called Joffrey rather than Jeffrey, because you can call them Jeffrey in British, English, but you could also be called Joffrey. And Joffrey is terribly, terribly snobby rather than just called Jeffrey. And it is slightly different spelling, but you can pronounce it either way. So I kind of like that he was called Joffrey. Joffrey is a bit of a stick in the mud. He definitely has a stick up his ass. He is kind of the legal counsel in the Dragon Council for his father, Grimbold. He has someone that he is not supposed to get along with because the dragon clans are supposed to be enemies. So Joffrey Drake is part of the Amethyst clan, and Ian Brand is the Topaz clan legal representative as well. So the two of them are actually supposed to work together, and they actually get on very, very well. And in fact, for the last 100 years, they've been getting on immensely well, rather like they were in a relationship. Not that anyone would know. And I love that about it, that it really starts off with a taboo. These two alphas are not supposed to be together. That's not the done thing in this day and age. Oh. And so it would have been a terrible taboo. Well, of course, when you start reading it, this is silly. But because this is the world that they live in and inhabit, it seems perfectly fine and normal. You're like, yes, oh, I can see that. It's not going to be good. Now, the bad thing is that poor Harry, unbeknownst to everyone else, he's kind of come up with the idea that disgraces are the best people for the dragons to mate with and to actually form mate bonds with. And so all of the dragon clans decide to get one of their disgraces and mix it with one of the other dragons from another clan and see if they can create mate bonds. Unfortunately, Ian Brand is the chosen dragon from his clan, and he now has to mate with a disgrace from the Ruby clan. This Ruby disgrace is being collected by Joffrey Drake, so he has to go and collect the disgrace who's going to take his place with his dragon. So obviously it's kind of heartbreaking in a sense. Now they meet Mathieu Boudreau, and I love the French accent that Michael Furielier he does. It's brilliant. It's so good. I love the Frenchness. It's so funny. But Mathieu Boudreau is this lovely ruby dragonette disgrace, and he's got a bit of a mind of his own. He always wanted to be a lawyer, and so he seems like a perfect addition to the relationship between the three of them. And it's quite an interesting one, and it brings up the taboos of what is and what isn't acceptable within dragon society and what needs to change, and it really is something that has been planned from the beginning. So I really like that about Mate. A lot of people's favourite is Joffrey, because he is, you know, the bit of the stick in the mud, but he actually has so much love and a heart of gold, and he is a wee sweetie pie as well. But I loved their relationship with Ian, Joffrey and Matthew. Now the next book in the series, it's book 4 overall out of 8, but it's the first spin-off story, and that is Swallow. And this one follows Grimbold Drake, who is the patriarch, the father of the Drake family, and he's also head of the Amethyst clan. He's also head of the Dragon Council. So he's kind of like a big, you know, head honcho kind of a guy. And he has lived on his own after bringing up his clutch of dragons, all his 7 sons. And he kind of still controls a lot of them. He still, you know, makes them do his bidding a lot of the time. He is kind of like a bit too demanding, I would think. Anyway, he has to deal with some of the unfortunate circumstances of a disgrace that has been rescued from one of the cloisters from the Topaz clan. When the cloisters, the pedigree was disbanded due to Matthew, Ian and Joffrey's sort of situation. It changes things dramatically in the dragon world. And so this one particular disgrace called Wally or Walter, who's also called Swallow, he has been given a bird name, which I enjoyed immensely. That little detail is very nice. So he has been called Swallow, which was a not very nice name, and he's called Walter instead by Grimbold. And he's a very young, they don't say exactly how old he is, I don't think, but he seems to be quite young, and he ends up staying at Grimbold's house because no one else will take him in. And Grimbold's, as soon as he meets him, he's just like, he will be mine, and that's it. But Walter is particularly interesting because he has powers, and he has ways of using his powers which are a little bit different from the other dragons, other disgraces. Anyway, it's a very much a May to December story. This one involving quite an old dragon, but also the daddy figure, and Walter, who has gone through a lot of trauma as well. So this one brings up some of the themes that Lynn Van Dorn has worked on before. He's kind of what do they call, curmudgeon, whereas Walter is kind of skittish, and the two of them have to, it's kind of a bit, you know, Beauty and the Beast kind of story. I definitely think you should read the first 3 volumes before you read this one. This is probably my least favourite out of all of this series, and I think I've only read it once, whereas the other ones I think I've read at least more than once. This one I've only read once, because I don't particularly like Grimbold. So I was like, no, you don't deserve him. You don't deserve Walter. Walter is a wee sweetheart. You do not deserve him. Especially because of the way that he has lived his life up till now, and just kind of be like, yeah, this is the way it is. He also bosses around his adult children, and I don't like to see adult men be put down by other adult men. I do not enjoy it. So I feel like he should show more love. Hopefully Walter will mellow him a bit more, but I still want the best for all the other drakes. He just seems to order them around a lot, and I don't like that. So yeah, Grimbold is not my favourite character out of all of the series, even if he is a daddy. Now the next in the series is called Magpie. You might have noticed that's also a bird name. I loved it. I love the little details. It's so good. Magpie follows the story of, unsurprisingly, Magpie, who's also called Misha. Misha is a diamond disgrace, so part of the diamond clan. He didn't know, he grew up thinking that he was just a beta, and then all of a sudden he was taken away to the pedigree cloisters and kind of locked away. And it's kind of that whole damsel in distress thing, but it's not really. They're kind of kept and made to learn things about jewels and money and riches and how to please dragons. And I just, no wonder they need to get rid of this system. But Misha's great. Misha has a secret. Misha is a brilliant hacker and knows how to use the dark web and has been doing it since he was really, really young. And his favourite thing is stealing from dragons because he hates his life and he's like, all I need to do is wait till I can get out of this hellhole, and until then I'm going to sneak into this room, get into this computer, and I'm going to do mischief. Ha 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 ha. And people will know me as the Magpie because I will take the shiny things from the dragons. Ha ha ha. And I love that about Magpie. I also love Michael Furiolo's Russian accent. It's so good. I love Misha. Misha's great as a character because Misha is not the typical Omega in terms of his personality. He's very forthright. He's like, this is who I am. This is what I want. I deserve better. And I like that. He wasn't just for taking things as they were. He was going to go out and get what he wanted. And one of the things he wanted was to get his own back on the dragons in society who were, controlling all of these Omegas. But he also wanted to specifically get back at a particular dragon who's very good at keeping his family's money in cyber secure. And that was Reynard Drake. Reynard Drake is kind of like a lone figure. He likes to just be on his own, and he just makes sure that everyone in his family, in the Amethyst clan, that their money is secure, except he keeps getting this Magpie trying to get into his cyber security and trying to steal from him online. And the two of them have been having this sort of kind of rivalry online, this like cat and mouse game. And they've been enjoying it. They've been having so much fun. So when, obviously, Harry and his plan to mix the clans together to see if mates will form comes about, Misha goes in and changes the names on the pairings so that he's not with someone else that he doesn't want to be with, and he can get his dragon because he sees Reynard as his. And Reynard doesn't want to be part of this at all. He just is like, oh god, this is going to be awful. And he keeps pretending that he doesn't have any money. Like, oh, I can't afford it. Like, I've only got, $1 billion. I don't have enough money to have a mate and a clutch and all of that. Of course, he's got like billions and billions. He's just pretending he's a poor man. But it's because of his kind of personality. It's very quiet. And he doesn't like to be around people socially. So he's forced to interact with Misha or Magpie, and they are forced to be together. And there's an interesting element, a sort of kink element in this one, and I really loved it. I thought it was great. But in this one we also get a lot of action. Once again, there's a lot of drama and action and interest and heartbreak, and there's a few things going on. And this was particularly sad because Misha and Reynard definitely want to be mates, and it just doesn't seem to be happening. And I think that that kind of gave it a lot of pain, emotional pain to the story. There's a lot going on. There's definitely high stakes in this one. Definite high stakes. And I really did enjoy it. I really liked Misha as a character. I liked Reynard. He seemed to enjoy being bossed around, which I liked as well. But it was a little bit exciting, and it was a little bit traumatic at times. So, but once again, the old characters were back. They were in, and and it was nice to see all of them coming in as well. I do enjoy all of these interactions with the other characters. So yeah, Magpie. There is a moment in it that there is high stakes, and it is quite sad, and so it was very exciting to read. Now, book 6 in the series is maybe my second favourite. Up there with my favourite. Like, Bond and Finch definitely are up there. I love Finch. I loved Finch. Finch is, once again, a bird's name. But Finch is the secretary to a dragon. And the dragon is Hugh Drake, also, obviously, one of the brothers. And Finch has worked for Hugh for, I think it's 13 years when this story starts. And so he's been around with Hugh for a long time. Hugh is the only Drake sibling who has been sanctioned for a mate and for a clutch, for any offspring. He's been allowed for, you get it for like 100 years or so. Hey, you can make as many kids as you want during this 100-year period. And so Hugh's tried to mate with a few, but it's been quite a while since he's tried to mate with any of the pedigree omegas. And of course, now the pedigree has come to an end, and he wasn't chosen for the experiment, so he didn't get to his own disgrace. And so now he's running out of time for his sanction period, and still no mate and no offspring, no clutch and no disgraces. And just as well that he has Finch there to help and support him, because what would he do without him? Finch is a treasure. He's such a treasure. And I absolutely love the way that Hugh is around Finch. Finch is also a Drake, but not that Hugh knows it. Finch is a disgrace, and he's kept it a secret the whole time. He's pretending that he's not. And so Hugh, when he catches the idea of finding all of the omegas that were disgraces in the pedigree, that have aged out and have been, you know, allowed to roam free in the world, maybe he can get his own little mate from them. So he asks Finch to make a list of all of them that have aged out of the pedigree. And of course Finch does, except he doesn't put himself on the list. Oh, it's such a great story, because you just are like, well, obviously you two are meant to be together because you're so perfect. And they are just so perfect. This is like, I don't know, it's like they've been together the whole time. So it's kind of friends to lovers, because they are friends. But it's just so sweet, because Hugh is kind of oblivious to how he feels about Finch. And Finch is kind of aware of how he feels, and yet neither of them are like, this is love. They're just, I love you so, you're so great, oh, it's so brilliant. And so the affection is there right from the beginning, which is so sweet to see. But how they kind of inch forward, and it's like one step forward, two steps back, and the way that they interact with each other is just super sweet and so cute. And Finch obviously has a hard time dealing with the idea that disgraces are actually dragons, and that he shouldn't be thinking of himself as a disgrace anymore. So he has a real emotional hard time about it. And I think that's the case if you've constantly been told that you're lesser all your life. It's going to be really hard for you to turn around and think well of yourself if society as a whole turns around and says, oh yeah, we were wrong, you're fine. And it's like, well, you've told me I'm not all my life. So, it was just so sweet, and they're so funny together. I really love Hugh. He's an idiot. He's such an idiot. And I loved the interactions with Finch asking, you know, is he okay? I'm a little bit worried, and he has to phone Everard because it's like medically. Is he okay? I'm a little bit concerned. And Everard says, oh, it'll be fine as long as he doesn't do this, this and this. And Finch is kind of like, okay, because he's already done those things. It's just so funny. It's a really nice one. It's a really sweet one. But it's also, like I said, it deals with Finch's sort of self-esteem. And when they have their day out before the party, I love it. It's like the perfect day. I was really impressed. I would love a date like that. I love it. It's really good. The two of them are funny. And the funfetti, the funfetti cake, so good. Just little touches all throughout this one just made it really fun to read and really sweet. This is the most fluffy book out of the series, for sure. And Hugh, when he tries to get Finch back, is just brilliant. There is also an element of danger in this one as well, but it's very, very small. But it definitely helps to build up from what's happened in Magpie, and so you can see a pattern forming here. And it does, once again, show that the series as a whole has been planned really well, and I'm enjoying it a lot. I really did love Finch. It's a fantastic book. I think I've listened to it 3 times. It's just hilarious. The funfetti cake thing is just... And his amethyst cufflinks. Oh, just so many little things. It's so, so good. So yeah, I definitely recommend that you keep on going so you can get to Finch's story. Now, the 7th and the final book that you can read at the moment is Peregrine. And this only came out the 3rd of June. 2021, so this year. And so I'd already started, or I just started the series a little bit after this volume had been released, so I was bang on time for reading this one. So this is the 7th out of 8. There will be one more. Peregrine follows the kind of relationship between Sebastian Drake and Peregrine from the 1500s. It's kind of like, well, they're the only ones that were actually a mate pair from the very beginning in Clutch, when you first are introduced to them, and their clutch is hatching. So Peregrine, as the Omega, who was a disgrace and has been mated to Sebastian for hundreds of years, and you get their story told through sections of past and present. So you get their story from when they first meet, which is really nice. I loved their meeting and how they got together, and also what's going on in their life at the moment. But the big thing in this one, and it is really, really important that you read the content warning, it does involve a lot to do with fertility issues, and if you have any miscarriage or anything like that as a trigger, then do make sure that you check out the content warning beforehand. It is heartbreaking. It is so heartbreaking. Their story is so sweet, and you get to know more about Peregrine, who has turned up all this time and has always been this lovely being and this lovely supportive character, and yet behind this, I wouldn't say it's a facade because it's really who Peregrine is, you also get all of this heartbreak and just pain and sorrow for years and hundreds of years, and it's like, oh my god. It's tough. It's a tough one. So yes, if there are any, concerns about it, I would leave it. If you do not enjoy stories about miscarriage, then yes, this is definitely one to avoid. But it is a sweet one, and it does have, obviously, a happy ending, as all of the stories do. But it also, once again, carries on from Magpie, and it carries on from Finch, this thread of the story that includes the next character in the 8th book. Peregrine and Sebastian have always just been there in the stories. Sebastian being a big, giant, hulking dragon who likes to eat bad men and hasn't been able to do that very much. Very stoic. He doesn't say very much. He's kind of known as the protector. And Peregrine, who's the sweet, lovely, mothering figure of everyone. And the two of them are, I think, such wonderful aspects to the whole series, that it was nice that they got their own one and that you got to know about the background between the two of them. And Peregrine came from this Dutch pedigree, and Sebastian just saw him and was like, he's mine. Peregrine was just like, okay then, because at that point in time in the 1500s, that was just how it was, and also the way that you thought about things was just the way it was. And so, you know, if a dragon said that you belonged to the dragon, then that's what you did. But because Sebastian is actually quite a nice dragon, he got on quite well with Sebastian and Peregrine together. They were actually quite a nice pair. And it is quite interesting to see it from that, like, very long time ago kind of period, and then how they are with each other modern day, and the love that they still have, which is very, very strong. It was nice, but also this one, once again, was very emotional, but it was also quite exciting and anxiety creating, because I really wanted the happily ever after. I wanted the good ending, but it was at the expense of, I think, another character, which we don't really know very much about, and I'm sure they're going to do the bait and switch again. Like, this character has been introduced a few times, and you definitely do not want to like this character. You do not want to, and yeah, I'm convinced that there will be another redemption arc for this character. But in terms of Peregrine and Sebastian's story, this is a really sweet one, and the one that needed to be told, and I'm really glad that we got it. So in this story, we get a lot of things being told that's kind of happening off to the side, but you don't get to know what's going on. And in that same way that Clutch and Bond happened, that you're going to get one side of the story from one character, and the next volume, volume 8, you're bound to get the other side of the story. So that does leave the 8th volume that has not yet been released. So if you are intrigued, you can get plenty of time to read the whole series of Forbidden Desires, including all of the spin-off volumes, before the 8th volume, which is called Raven, which I think comes out at the end of January. So I'm very much looking forward to this story. It's supposed to be the final one, and it kind of follows the final Drake, as it were, and his Omega, at this point, obviously called Raven, which is another bird. And Raven has popped up as a sort of antagonist, a very dangerous antagonist in a few of the stories, and his kind of partner, or not, is the Drake brother Bertram, who's also known as Frederick. It's all very confusing, so I am looking forward to having a lot of my questions answered. There's definitely been some hints about it, and especially at the end of Peregrine, Nate says, I don't know what's going on, stop hinting at this and just tell me what needs to be. And I'm like, yes, Nate, yes, I need to know as well. Stop just like taunting me with, hey, there's a story here, you want to hear it? Yes, I do, and I have to wait until January. So I'm looking forward to learning about Raven, who basically in Peregrine there is a moment when Raven the character starts speaking, and Raven has been obviously around for a long time because he pops up in Peregrine's story. And so he is able to speak with lots of different accents, but his accent doesn't stay. It warbles between the different accents. Even whilst he's speaking one sentence, he might, you know, switch between 3 different accents. And Michael Fariello did an amazing job of doing Russian or Belarusian, and then Irish, American, British, all seamlessly kind of going from one to another whilst speaking the same sentence, and also mimicking another character's voice. Bertram's voice he does in a sort of Sean Connery accent, which I love. It's basically his Sean Connery impression, because they're all supposed to be British, but they kind of have a slight American twang now. And Bertram has always sounded like Sean Connery, and I just love it. I just love it, brother. It's brilliant. That was just basically it. That was good. Well done. But yeah, there are things about this series that I absolutely love. I love the brothers. I love their partners, their mates, and I love the children. The children are adorable. And one of the main things that I really love about the series is the pets. everyone has a pet and they all love their pets. And so it's just chef's kiss. I love it. The whole series. I can't say enough good things about it. So I hope I'm convincing you to read this. And if you have already, you'll know exactly what I've just been talking about for probably half an hour. It's such a good series. I love it. And I cannot wait for January. So obviously I have spoken way more than I thought I was going to or had planned to about all of Lynn Van Dorn's novels that I have read. But there are a few that I haven't read. Some of them are part of charity anthologies. Some of them are little novellas that for some reason or not I cannot get hold of. I do not know where they are. They're not available on Amazon, so I can't buy them, unfortunately. One of them is called Frostbite, and it was available as a Winter Wonderland story giveaway that was happening at the start of the year. This was in January, and of course I didn't know anything about this. I wish I had known, because lots and lots of romance writers were giving away free short stories or novellas or even full volumes during this sort of time period between the 1st and the 10th of January. And one of them was a short story called Frostbite that involved vampires. And I was like, oh no, and I can't get hold of it now because it was only available for free download during that time period. So I can't get a hold of it now. And I would so be reading that. One, because I've read everything so far, but also because it's vampires and I love a good vampire story and I'd love to see what Lynn Van Dorn did with vampires. So unfortunately there is no access to Frostbite. If there was, I would be buying it. I want to read this vampire story that Lynn Van Dorn has done. So yeah, unfortunately there are a few things that I have not been able to read. So I can't with all honesty say that I have read every novel, but I'm not sure. Do short stories and little versions of short stories count? I guess they do. So yeah, I haven't read everything, but I have read an awful lot, and whatever I could get my hands on. And I've also read everything that she has sent through the newsletter, since I signed up to her newsletter, and you can do that if you go to her website. She does have one, and you get a newsletter with short stories and things. And the last one that she sent was hilarious, another frat boy story, and I enjoyed it immensely. It was great fun. It was another voyeuristic type one, and chef's kiss. It was brilliant. So yes, everything from Lynn Van Dorn. I cannot rate her high enough. It's so good. I want you all to go out and enjoy yourself reading some Lynn Van Dorn works. The witty banter, the good characterization, the fact that she creates characters that you can hate and love to hate, and then the very next novel, you love them for real and they're cinnamon rolls and they need to be protected. And I hate that because I wanted to hate them, but now I love them. She's very good at that. So yeah. I'm looking forward to whatever she produces in the future, and I will be putting it down on my to be read pile for sure. She has made a fan for life. So yeah, go out and read the Forbidden Desire series so we can fangirl together about dragons, which is not something I thought I would say at the start of 2021. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this very long video, longer than it was supposed to be, about me raving about Lynn Van Dorn. Remember, every day is a VL day, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone. Bye.